Sorry to interrupt, but you are muted.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think it's on. I think it's on. Check one.
Okay, مظبوط. Go ahead. Yeah. So, hi everyone. Thank you for being with us, whether online or in the room. I hope you can hear me now.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Let's connect this. It's not disconnecting. Disconnect. I've got خلاص. That. Now you can connect with us.
Okay.
You can share it.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you.
So hi everyone. Thank you for being with us in this talk, whether online or in this room. So while I was muted, I was saying that in the middle of the crisis that we're currently facing in the country, roadmaps may not work for the majority of sectors. However, when it comes to the agro-food industry, this crisis is actually an opportunity, as we will see in this talk. Let's start first with quick facts about agro-food sector in Lebanon. And let me first tell you that this presentation was prepared based on a report that I prepared for the TIF project of USAID about the agro-food sector analysis. And this report will be shared soon with all the findings. Also, I relied on information shared by Ministry of Economy and Trade and by the Customs, knowing that the numbers may not reflect the reality in light of the scarcity of data in the country. If we look at how the agri-food sector grew in the last few years, between 2011-2016 and 2016 to 2021, by region, we can see that for all regions, there has been growth, in particular in Latin America and in Europe. In Latin America, 0.1 versus 2.6%, and Europe 0.5 to 1.2% between 2011-2016 and 2016-2021. But also we can see that different regions in the world have been requesting the agro-food products from Lebanon. If we compare the agro-food industry to other subsectors in the industry, we can see that it is the number one among all sectors in terms of contribution to the GDP. So the agro-food contributes with 38% of the total industrial GDP. If we look how the contribution to the total GDP increased over time from 2010 till 2018, you can see that the growth has been there. And actually, we expect that the growth continues to exist following the pandemic and economic crisis. Since we can no longer rely on food imports, usually we import around 80% of our food needs. And in light of the currency crisis, we didn't have a choice but to do import substitution efforts in the country. So the food industry in Lebanon is nowadays booming. And this can be reflected by the job opportunities our nutrition graduates at LAU are getting. Every day we get requests from the industry to recruit people, reflecting the growth in their production, which is very promising. If we look at the distribution of the agro-food companies in Lebanon, we can see that they are mainly located in Mount Lebanon and Bekaa. In Mount Lebanon, since the bulk of activities takes place in Mount Lebanon. In Bekaa, since we have the space and we have the raw materials. Looking at our exports, we mostly export processed fruits. So we're talking about jam, jellies, and so on, followed by chocolate, sauces and preparations, in addition to olive oil and wine. And I will focus on the wine in a bit because it is one of the major sectors to invest in nowadays in Lebanon. Looking at the exporting countries, we can see that Saudi Arabia is number one, followed by United States, Canada, Qatar, United Arab Emirates. And Saudi Arabia used to import more products. However, due to political reasons, they banned a big part of the Lebanese imports. However, the good thing is that they are now opening back to receive Lebanese products. For example, yesterday, Qatar removed the ban on the imports of food products, which is promising as well. Now, looking at the imports, because in the current crisis, we no longer can import food products like before. Sorry about this. Okay, sorry about this. So, back to the imports. Since we can no longer import many products due to the currency crisis, it's important to see what we actually import in order to map those imports and try to invest in them. Unfortunately, in Lebanon, and this is one challenge, we don't have an accurate map on what we make and what we import, because lots of facilities are not registered and we have smuggling activities. But according to Lebanese customs, this is what we imported in 2020. So despite the fact that we have the land, we have the resources to make enough dairy products, we still import dairy products. We import as well cereal-based products, for example, pasta, cornflakes, and so on. We import meat products, cocoa products, and in many cases, vegetables and fruit-based products. What makes our agro-food sector competitive is the following. First, we have large, fertile, diversified agriculture land. So in other words, this diversity that we have allows us to harvest crops all year long. And if we compare Lebanon to other Arab countries, Lebanon is number 2 in terms of the agricultural land percentage out of the total land area. In Lebanon, 64% of the land can be planted. Also, we have skilled labor force. For example, last year, we had 30,000 students in Lebanese universities majoring in fields related to agro-food. So we're talking about agricultural engineering, food science, nutrition, chemistry, biology, biochemistry. So we don't have shortage in the competitive, in the skilled labor. We have the expatriates. As you know, we have Lebanese communities all over the world, and they always request Lebanese products. On the other hand, we have lots of challenges. I will summarize them as follows. First of all, in terms of supply. I previously mentioned that we import pasta. We don't have enough wheat in Lebanon to cover our pasta production. So from the beginning, we don't have the enough raw materials. And recently, this issue became more challenging in light of the Ukrainian crisis, since we rely on Ukraine in our cereal and our frying oil imports. Milk, fresh milk is not being produced enough because the animal feed is super expensive. That's why we cannot rely on our local dairy industry, and we keep on importing dairy products. Powdered milk is very expensive to use. So this is another opportunity to invest in the farming sector, since the demand over fresh milk is very high and the industry is thirsty to get fresh milk and process it to dairy products. Unfortunately, we don't have control over fertilizers and pesticides. Either they are not approved, or farmers overuse these chemicals, and this will definitely affect the quality of the end product and the food safety as whole. Also, investing in technology is limited, especially recently, since we no longer have loans. We no longer have kafalat program, for example. So technology modernization has been limited. Moving to the production, the cost of production is very high, since the power crisis implies having your own generator in the facility, which will increase the cost significantly. Also, the exodus of qualified staff out of the country. It's true that we have lots of graduates in the field, yet the highly experienced people in the agro-food sector are leaving, especially to Gulf countries. As I said, updating machinery is limited. We don't have enough innovation in our products. We rely on what is trendy outside. Our traditional products remain the same, unlike what happens in Turkey, for example. They take their traditional foods and spice them up to accommodate all nationalities. Unfortunately, the agro-food industry targets the Lebanese communities abroad, and this is another limitation. Research and development is limited since we don't have funding for it. It's a small country, so industry doesn't find the R&D as a main activity, which would limit the innovation in this sector. Moving to aggregation, unfortunately, by culture, Lebanese facilities do not collaborate together. And in many cases, they get big orders from China, for example. One industry cannot fulfill this order. So in other countries, they do what we call aggregates. So different canning industries would work together to meet a certain large order. In Lebanon, we don't do it because, you know, we have it by mentality. We don't like to collaborate. And this is affecting our access to mainstream and large international markets. Our industrial zones are absent. And when you don't have industrial zones, the cost of production increases. Since you wouldn't have the needed infrastructure in place, you have to do it yourself. The United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, invested in industrial zones, yet unfortunately the Lebanese government didn't fulfill the promises of establishing those zones. If we look at the logistics and distribution, in Lebanon, in many areas, we don't have efficient road network. For example, if you want to move your products, if you want to export them to Jordan, you need to take Dahr al-Baydar to Syria, then to Jordan. Imagine if we have a tunnel from Beirut directly to Bekaa, how much we can save money on the industry by having it. Because the congestion that we have, the inefficient road network is increasing the cost and therefore reducing the export opportunities. The inspection at the borders is very complicated. In many cases, the truck can stay up to 2-3 weeks at the Syrian or Jordanian borders. By then, the product would have expired. We have strike all the time by public employees. So if you have any paper as industrialist to finish, it may take months until you can have it ready. And this delays all the agro-food operations. The cost of freight services is high vis-à-vis competition. We have too many entities in Lebanon trying to help or pretending to help. But unfortunately, as we say in Arabic, بس يكتروا الطباخين بتنتزع الطبخة. We don't have one entity in charge of the trade activities. So any industrialist needs to deal with many ministries anytime they want to export their product. We don't have the one window service that the World Bank keeps on asking the Lebanese government to have it. The Lebanese government pretends we have it, but actually we don't, since employees are on a strike all the time. No more credit facilities, no more overdraft services, since the banking sector is collapsing. If we look at the business and investment enabling environment, the regulations are not updated. You can see our parliament, how non-functional it is. There is a list of regulations that needs to be approved, yet they are not, for political reasons. And to do business in Lebanon, it is complicated time-wise and it is expensive. The food inspection system in Lebanon is very weak. So we don't have enough inspectors. Inspectors are always on strike. Their salaries are peanuts nowadays, so we wouldn't expect them to do their job properly. The cooperatives in rural areas can support agro-food industry, yet the regulatory framework is absent or outdated. In terms of promoting our products outside, the efforts are uncoordinated and limited. As I said, the research and development culture is not present, and the labs that can support research and development are very limited, and those that are present are not certified or accredited necessarily, meaning the R&D efforts are challenging. We do have in Lebanon several existing interventions that are helping the agro-food industry big time. So we have, for example, LabTrade, an initiative in the Ministry of Economy supported by René Mawad Foundation to support Lebanese exports to outside. We have Mazij, which is a project done by UNIDO to better promote our za'atar. We have Ra'idat al-Reef by the Food and Agriculture Organization. This project has been supporting more than 250 women groups in rural areas to establish cooperatives and get equipment to improve their buni production. We do have the PSDP, a joint program by different UN entities, and USAID big time. USAID currently has in Lebanon many projects such as CSP, TIF, ARE. All of these projects support the food industry, and we know one of them is Royal Organic, owned by your cousin Ghada. A real success story that always gets support from USAID for export and for improving the local production. Now, let's talk about what we can do to face those challenges. Because again, in the case of the agro-food industry, the challenges are actually opportunities. Import substitution. Since we can no longer import all the products like before, we need to make them locally. But we cannot make everything locally since we lack the raw materials, we lack the equipment, we lack the expertise. However, nowadays everything is getting better since we have no other choice but to invest in the import substitution. For example, as I told you before, if you go to the Ministry of Industry or Ministry of Economy and Trade, you ask them, what do we make in Lebanon? They wouldn't give you the numbers because simply they have only the numbers of the registered industries. And according to unofficial statistics, 60% of the facilities are not registered. Therefore, the government wouldn't know what we actually make. And this is a big challenge. So we need to start first with the mapping. Then we need to have the R&D support. For example, following the crisis, Nutella is no longer affordable, you know, the spreadable chocolate, to majority of families. We now have local production of spreadable chocolate of excellent quality. However, it took us 5 years to make it because in the beginning it wasn't successful. We don't have the know-how, we don't have the R&D facilities. But with time, we have nowadays a Lebanese or 2 Lebanese brands with excellent qualities. So we do have success stories in this regard, but the R&D efforts are being super slow. Analytical labs, unfortunately, the official labs like those by LARI, Lebanese Agricultural Research Institute, or ERI, Industrial Research Institute, can no longer do all the needed testing since they cannot buy the consumables. And the university laboratories, for example, like ours, doesn't have the ISO 17025 accreditation. So if any industry would like to send the sample to a university, they would get the result. However, they cannot use this result when they want to export. So unless the lab is accredited, the result wouldn't be of importance to the industrialist. Nowadays, there are efforts by many university labs to get the needed accreditation in order to support the R&D activities of the industry. Second, market linkages, trade promotion, access to new markets. For example, in particular, there has been high demand over our olive oil and wine. However, if the industrialist cannot travel abroad, cannot participate in international fairs, cannot get access to these new markets, they wouldn't be able to export their products. That's why there should be a support in reaching out to those events, participating in international expos in order to highlight the Lebanese brand. Unfortunately, if we compare our brand to that of our neighbor in the south, they were able to convince the whole world that hummus belongs to them, knowing that we all know that it belongs to us. But after all, they were able to convince everyone since they participate in all international fairs, they do tasting to people, they reach out to new markets, while us, the authentic people, do not have this opportunity. So this is an important point to highlight. When it comes to export efforts, we don't have a strategy. So if you ask the Minister of Industry or Minister of Economy, what is our national export strategy, they wouldn't know. So we need to specify which products are in demand abroad in order to support them. Otherwise, the efforts will be like مشتتين everywhere. We need to focus our efforts to certain niche products to have an export strategy in order to map different ongoing initiatives to avoid duplications. Because nowadays you can see USAID, René Mawad Foundation, many other organizations are supporting exports, and in many cases, one company may benefit from 2 donors, while other companies are not benefiting at all. Because again, it's not being done under the umbrella of the government since the government is absent. Bainama, if we have a national strategy, all those donors would work under the umbrella of the government, and therefore duplications will not take place. We need technical assistance and advisory. For example, we need mozzarella in Lebanon because we no longer can import it. But there is no expert in Lebanon that can train a dairy industry on the best way to make mozzarella. Back then, when we decided to make chocolate spreads, there was no expert in Lebanon to really know how to make it. That's why it took us 4 or 5 years to reach the right recipe. So technical assistance is needed. Also, we need to implement international standards. Any industry that needs to export needs to have international certifications such as HACCP and ISO 22000. These cannot be obtained unless the industry gets technical assistance. So a support should be given in this regard. And here we need to draw a fine line between what we can export and what we need to keep it locally. For example, if we want to make breakfast cereals in Lebanon, and there is shortage over breakfast cereals in Lebanon, the government should monitor how much we are exporting, because otherwise we will have insecurity in Lebanon. So we don't want our industry to make products just for exports. We want our industry to fulfill our need and then to export. But to the industrialist, exporting the products is more profitable, unless the government or donors subsidize and support in order to keep our local products here, and whatever in excess will be exported. As I said, the Lebanon brand is not highlighted enough. We only rely on our expatriates, which is good, yet not enough. If you go now to the Arab countries, our mouni, traditional mouni, such as Magdous, Kishk, is being produced by different Arab countries. It's no longer only Lebanon that makes these products. Now Jordan does it, Syria does it. So our brand needs to be better highlighted to increase our market share. The quality concept needs to be more implemented. For this, more trainings, more workshops must be done to highlight and to instill the culture of food safety and quality among processors. And what is very important is to implement the reforms, because any expert in the field would know what is needed to boost our food industry. But unless the reforms are being implemented by the parliament, by setting the needed regulations, by the Council of Ministers in terms of implementation, the competitiveness will not exist. Because again, the competition is fierce, and unless we have those reforms, we cannot really expand. I will show you now some promising sectors that we really need to focus on. First one is the olive oil. The Lebanese olive oil is among the best in the world, according to all the experts in the olive oil sector. So each year there are international events related to olive oil tasting in Spain, Italy, Greece. Lebanon is always a winner. The quality is among the best. And if we look at our export between 2010 to 2019, we can see that there is a trend in this regard. Following 2019, the export of olive oil is booming, because the farmer in Lebanon that harvests oil, to them it's better to export than to sell it locally. Because locally, they will sell it with cheap prices, versus exporting it will generate fresh money. That's why last year the Minister of Agriculture issued a decree to limit the olive oil export to fulfill the local needs, because you know olive oil is an important component of the Mediterranean diet. If we no longer consume olive oil in Lebanon, we end up getting diseases, since olive oil is super healthy. With this, olive oil sector is booming. And what's good about olive oil, its production is not costly at all, because growing olive trees is very affordable. And all what you need to do is to press, separate oil from the water, fill it in bottles, and that's it. So it doesn't require lots of power, lots of human labor. Olive oil is really promising, especially in markets like USA, Arab countries, and Canada. Another booming sector is wine. What's funny is that we always say Lebanon is the largest producer of wine in the Arab world, as if there is another country that is allowed to produce wine in the region. So it's true, we are the largest producer of wine in the Arab countries, but when we compare our production to France or Spain, it's still very limited. But if you look at the trend, there has been growth. Recently, the growth increased. This is something to praise the Ministry of External Affairs in this regard. A few years ago, when Gibran Bassil was in charge, we had those conventions in different countries where different Lebanese businessmen used to meet and to network. And this is where the concept of wine really emerged. For example, in China, they now demand the Lebanese wine big time. Before, they used not to know about Lebanese wine. So in this regard, the government did an excellent job to promote Lebanese wine. And now if you go to rural area like West Bekaa, North Bekaa, growing grapes is everywhere. And even in North Bekaa, nowadays, it's more profitable to grow grapes than to grow hashish, which is a precedence. Before, it used to be the opposite. Nowadays, it's no longer applicable since the harvesting of hashish in Syria is cheaper. So Syria now is taking the market, the main market share of hashish. The farmers in Bekaa have no choice but to look for alternatives, and growing grapes is a really good alternative. And nowadays we export our wine to different countries in the world, mainly UK, USA, France, and other countries. Another promising sector is the dried fruits and vegetables. So in Lebanon, we get 300 days of sun, especially in Bekaa, where the weather is very dry, which is an excellent weather to dehydrate crops. And for this, we can refer to the experience of Turkey. The weather in Turkey is very similar to that of Bekaa. Turkey is now #1 in the world in terms of dried fruits production. It is now a trend. It is very promising to dry crops because we are blessed to have the sun, we have the dry atmosphere in Bekaa. So it is now a trend to dry tomatoes, to dry apples, to try different fruits. This is good as well to reduce food loss. So this is good for the environment, good for the farmer, and it doesn't involve any cost. Saudi Arabia is and the States are major importers of our dried fruits, and we can invest in this sector. Chocolate, although we don't grow cocoa beans, as you know. However, if you go to the Gulf countries, #1 selling chocolate retail is Pachi. So we can get the raw material, the cocoa butter, and we can process it to chocolate and export it to different countries. The reason why Lebanon can be competitive in this regard is the creativity that we have vis-a-vis other Arab countries. So any Arab country can get the chocolate, but in Lebanon, the way we brand the chocolate is really unique. we always add to chocolate ingredients that are not present in other countries. For example, when we dip, let's say, the apple in chocolate, this is something that is not really common, yet Lebanese chocolate industries are really doing great in it and exporting such product to all Arab countries. Dairy, as we said, we need to invest in dairy. We still import dairy products, and from Saudi Arabia, for example, when we would consider that we should do the opposite, to export dairy products to Saudi Arabia. We import dairy products from Saudi Arabia, again, because the powdered milk, which is the main ingredient, is expensive. Second, the fresh milk is not available. So to do well in dairy sector, we need to invest in the farming, at the farming level, in terms of animal feed, in terms of supporting farmers to increase the fresh milk production, which will subsequently process to dairy products that can fulfill our local needs and, if needed, can be exported. And unfortunately, you can see how dairy decreased over time in terms of export. Because, again, we don't have enough cows, we don't have enough fresh milk production, and the powdered milk is not affordable to the industry. So, in every challenge lives a greater opportunity. The agro-food industry is facing challenges, yet it is among the very few sectors in the country that is doing good, yet it can do better. So now it is the time to turn a challenge into opportunity, and I always advise our students in the nutrition program to have a career in this sector, and I can see many of them now attending the talk. There are lots of opportunities, and the return on the investment in this field is really worth it. I cannot recall of any startup food industry that failed to grow. Any startups in the food industry can do great, because again, it is the moment to substitute our imports, and with the expertise that we have, with the know-how that our graduates have, we can make miracles. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Very inspiring. So we'll take any questions from the room or online.